This is the August 17th, 2021 Montgomery Independent School District Board of Trustees meeting. The time is 6:04 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, we do have a number of special recognitions. Dr. Morrison?
Thank you, President Fuller. When you open school, there is a tremendous amount of logistical work that has to happen in the best of circumstances. And really, when you think about hiring, staffing, getting buildings ready, transport, all the things that have to happen, there's a lot of folks that have an opportunity to be recognized. But then there's a group of folks that if they weren't doing their job at incredibly high levels, you wouldn't notice it until it's a problem. But you don't notice it because the people that we have in Montgomery ISD just do a fantastic job. We have been wanting to bring this group of individuals forward for recognition for some time. We think that the start of school is more than an appropriate time to recognize the tremendous contribution that our maintenance brings to Montgomery ISD. Over the next several months, you're going to hear something that we're going to be working on called culture of respect. And there's lots of different ways we are going to look at that, but part of it is that everybody recognizes that our school district has two different types of employees, those who directly teach and those who directly support teaching. And the individuals we're going to recognize tonight are valuable and critically important in supporting the teaching and learning that happens here in Montgomery ISD. And I'd like to ask Chris Lynn to come forward and get us an opportunity to recognize these fantastic individuals in our school district.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Morrison. As Dr. Morrison said, we get the privilege this evening of honoring our maintenance department. This group is special to me because most people don't know, but my educational career started as a member of the maintenance department. And so I understand exactly what they do on a daily basis. And so, Joe, if you would please come forward. Joe Kynard, our Director of Maintenance, just on behalf of myself, Dr. Morrison, and the entire Montgomery ISD staff. Thank you, men and women, for joining us this evening. We have certificates for your staff, and so please accept our appreciation for all the many tasks that you get asked to do throughout the year, particularly as we're starting schools. We know you get pulled by the teachers who are walking down the hallway, hey, can you do this for me real quick? While you're there to fix something else. So for everything that you do across this district, from the start of the school year to the end of the school year, our sincere appreciation for that. Would like to say a few words?
All I can say is that these guys and women that we have in our maintenance department, they are behind the scenes. Sometimes they'll be up front and center, but the most times you won't even know they're there. But just because you don't see them, they're definitely behind the scenes working hard. And I appreciate everything they do for the district, just as I appreciate all levels of the academics, the board, and everybody else, because it takes everybody to get the schools open and running properly and smoothly. And I'm just very proud of this group of people right here.
Could you just real quickly introduce them and ask them to stand up real quick?
Okay. We got Elsa right up front, which y'all know Elsa very well here in your building. We got Sandra Pessel. We got Chris Clark, William Mosier, Mike Byer, James Vayon, Carlton White, Don Gibbs. We got Greg Devereaux, and man, my last one drawing a blank. We got man.
Sorry.
We got yeah.
So, thank you for allowing us a few minutes to recognize those fine men and women and the ones who couldn't be here with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I would like to say 2 stories real quick about our maintenance department, if y'all don't mind. And that is, I get to see a lot of them in the mornings when I drop my kids off. They know who I'm talking about, and they're always a pleasure. So you guys also get pulled in many different directions, so thank you for being flexible. And lastly, a real quick story. One of you guys had a busted pipe the day before school started, and you were able to get that fixed, and such that kids didn't even know what happened. And that's the kind of stuff you guys do daily. I just wanted to call those specific things out and say from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for all you do. So. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And President Fuller, we also want to take the opportunity to recognize the amazing partnerships we have in Montgomery ISD with our business community. That shows up in so many different ways, but recently showed up for the return of Back to School Day, where our business partners come to our campuses and really do some amazing things to help make sure that we're ready for the start of school. What I appreciate is that when the Chamber first approached us about coming back with Back to School Day this year, we had the opportunity to bring in Shannon Reed with the Chamber and have a conversation with our principals and really make sure that what was being offered was really what was needed. And I think if you talk to our principals and if you talk to our business partners, they actually will tell you that this was the best Back to School Day that they've done, because what was happening on the campuses was truly special, truly needed, and very appreciated. And Justin, we have an opportunity to show everyone a little bit about what happened on that day.
You guys are awesome for stepping up for the community today. We appreciate you so much.
We're super excited to kick off the 21-22 school year. We're super excited that our Montgomery Chamber has come in to support our teachers.
Get Back to Work Day is one of our favorite days all year here at the Chamber, where our business community gets to give back and love on all of our teachers, all of our campuses.
We've had a great day with volunteers. We had some former students come, which is always very exciting for us. We had some of our former volunteer parents come in. They've done such a super job passing out school supplies.
We've got some people outside laying sod and pulling shrubs, people working in the garden, people painting.
Hanging up signs on our restroom talking about hand washing and just some different rules and expectations that we have for kiddos. They're also putting some labels on folders for our different offices. They're helping us with some flower pots outside.
And all of those things we probably would not get done without the help of the Chamber. So what they bring to us is invaluable. Don't know what we would do without them.
We love it. I mean, because we can physically see ourselves making an impact. We see the teachers coming back to work. They are in the admin and they are busy setting up their classrooms and just really getting ready to hone in on the children.
We have been blessed with 31 sponsors from our business community to get this week put together. And with all of their dollars, we bought wheelie carts for the brand new first-year teachers.
What a gift as a new teacher, because you have so many needs to provide for your students.
Very surprised because this is my 3rd week in being a band director, and I thought all the surprises were over with.
I'm excited to be in Montgomery because I've grown up here since kindergarten. It was just really nice having a lot of support from people kind of high up. It showed us that we mean something to the district.
I told her a job's enough for me, so this is all just icing on the cake for me.
Actually, it blew my mind. The thought that someone or that businesses would care is greatly heartwarming.
MISD is our largest employer here in the community, and they touch every fiber of Montgomery. And so it is so important that we have a healthy community, which starts right here in our schools.
At the end of the day, what you constantly hear from our business leaders is they are investing in one of the best resources that we have, which is our kids. And so they take it as a part of civic pride and responsibility to invest in our school district. And I'm just really, really grateful that that's the way our business community comes together here in Montgomery ISD.
Thanks to everybody that for everything you did got our students off to a great start. Next up, we have a hearing for citizens present to address the board about the proposed tax rate limit. Are there any comments to the board on that? Okay, hearing none, we next have public comments, and we do have 2 registered speakers. Tonight, we will start with Danielle Toombs-Thrower. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot respond to anything. We can simply say thank you, maybe correct a few elements, and we do allow 5 minutes for conversation. So, Ms. Toombs-Thrower, the floor is yours.
Good evening. You'll have to excuse me because I've never actually been before the board before. I graduated in '96. My daughter is a senior at the Montgomery High School, and things are way different. So it's a learning curve for me. I am worried that communication is not being perceived as it should. My daughter was told that band is the only thing that she can do. And then when you go to Senior Summit, she was told, all the seniors were told, join as many clubs as you want. We support you. We want you to do this. We want you to be involved. That is not the case. Communication is key. We plan things around the calendars that the students get from their teachers, their directors, the football, everything that you can think of has a calendar that is set out. On July 28th, I sent an email to Mr. Cameron and Dr. Scher regarding the convocation and fish camp. They responded, and no, I did not like the response. I was taken aback by it. I understand that everybody has their own opinions, their own agendas on what they see as fit. But when it boils down to it, I am my daughter's parent. Not you, not Dr. Shore, not Mr. Cameron. And when we make appointments for our children, we do it based on the calendars that they put out. And by doing what he did in July, which was tell the students, these are mandatory things that you have to attend. You have to be at the convocation. You have to be at fish camp. That's unacceptable on my part because we had other plans made. And no, it was not something that couldn't be rescheduled. It just made my daughter look bad for the club that she is the president of. And the response that Mr. Cameron gave me to the email is, I'm going to read it right here. I'm sorry that you see student attendance expectations as threatening instead of an opportunity for personal student accountability toward the success of the band program. If the standards that I've set and enforce for the band are major inconvenience to you and your family, you are always welcome to remove your child from the program. My daughter has been a part of the band since 6th grade. He doesn't have to like me, but I do expect him to communicate with me. It should not take a parent I had to be nasty. It should not take a parent being nasty to a teacher who I will advocate for. I will tell anybody that will listen, teachers and police officers are the most underpaid, underappreciated people on this planet. And it shouldn't take me getting nasty for him to understand that students have more than one extracurricular thing. You want them to be involved in as many things as they can, so they're not going out and running the roads with their friends who don't view high school the same way your children do. That's my thought. I want her to be involved in as many things as she can. And when I go to Dr. Shore, she sends it to Mr. Cameron. This incident, Dr. Shore assured me that there was a way that Mr. Cameron and I could come to an agreement. I have yet to receive an email from Mr. Cameron since July 29th of this email that I just read you. He has not come to us as a family, he hasn't even come to my daughter and said, hey, we can do this. We can work with the Leo Club and the schedule that has. We can work with band. We can do this. He has not done that. It shouldn't take me being ugly. It shouldn't take me coming to the board for this man to communicate. And this is not just this year. It's been from the time she was a freshman. It should not, and it's not just me. It is multiple parents, but they choose not to engage him. Well, I'm not that parent. I'm responsible for her, and I'm responsible for her being an adult and taking responsibility. And that includes with her health and so forth and so on. And if he feels that band is more important, I have a big issue with that. So I'm coming to the board and asking you to please reiterate that communication is key. If your teachers will communicate, parents won't be so angry. Parents won't be so upset. Parents won't have to pay the $25 fees that you have to pay doctors to reschedule appointments. And I can tell you I've had $150 that I've had to pay because of that due to band and the fact that he does not communicate with parents in a timely fashion. That's not fair on any level. I wouldn't ask him to reschedule anything for the band. I'm just not that type of parent. And so I am just coming before the board to ask your principals to get with your teachers and ask them to communicate. If they're going to put out a calendar, please communicate with the parents. I am on parent, there's Remind, there's everything. If you go and look, he didn't change the schedule until I sent this out. He said he knew about this. I just received the schedule for the convocation performance the other day. How many days did it take him to send out this email on July 29th after my daughter has already committed to the Leo Club? And that's where I'm having an issue. And he doesn't want to communicate with me. I shouldn't have to drag Dr. Shore into everything, or Dr. Morrison, or Superintendent McFadden. I shouldn't have to drag y'all into this. He should be willing to communicate. And I will be the first one to tell you, I'm a very rough around the edges person. I'm going to send you a nice email. If you don't want to respond, I'm going to get ugly. If you don't want to respond, I'm going to get downright nasty.
Okay. That's our time, Ms. Thrower.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Eric Coburg. Mr. Coburg, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. I also am a first-time speaker in front of the board. Basically, and I didn't know that there were no answers available from the board from comments or whatnot, but basically I had a question. I found out about 4 days ago that free lunches and breakfast were being provided for all the students at the campus my son attends, and I wonder if that's also district-wide for every student in the district. I'm kind of familiar with Title I and the process that goes through to assess the level of free meals that are available and what funding that also brings in for other programs. My wife got a questionnaire to fill out for Title I qualification, I think, last week, and I want to say that not filling it out automatically entered a family income of $37,000, which for all the people who choose not to fill out the Title I questionnaire, it makes a lot of people in the district who are not Title I qualified. So I'm kind of wondering where that came from. There was no communication really to the parents to let us know that our kid was going to be eating on the government, essentially, for breakfast and lunch throughout the school year. And I'm wondering where that funding came from. Is it a Title I program? Is it something that all the schools in Texas have got? Is it something our district did specifically, or the campus that my son attends? So I was just wondering, and it kind of goes with the communication that the last speaker was talking about, is we've been in the district with children in the district, 4 of them actually, going on 6 years now. And I have to say that the communication that comes from the school district, if I go looking for it, like the steering committee meetings that went on, I guess, earlier last year, it was absolutely by accident that I found out about that and attended the third one, which by that time in the process, it was a little too late to get active. And I supplied my email address and said, yeah, I want to get involved, and please reach out to me and let me know when the next sessions are going on. I never heard a word from the district about it. So I go along with the communication that I think the district could do a better job of being proactive. If I were passive and got communication, it'd be great, but I haven't seen anything really about this tax proposal, I guess, that is going to be talked about or passed tonight. And when I don't get the information being passive, then I need to be proactive, and that's why this is the first board meeting that I've attended. And unless, we get more communication, understanding what's going on from our servants, the school board that works for us, the community who pays the taxes, then I'm going to continue to come and find out what's going on. Not saying there's anything wrong going on, but I like to be aware and know what's going on in the community. And then a second thing, as I was going through the past meeting minutes and looking at the agenda for tonight's, I noticed that there were some items where it said which goals each agenda item addressed. And I couldn't find anywhere on the website or anywhere else in past meeting minutes or anything what those goals were. I kind of remember from the steering committee meeting that I attended that there were, I think, 5 goals that the school district is aiming for to become a district of excellence. And if you just had a little key or something that was attached to the minutes or the agenda so that people could decipher that this particular meeting agenda item refers back to goal number 3 and then state what it is. And that's all I had to say.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's our registered speakers tonight. We will move on now to our action items, actually our consent agenda. Board members, does anyone wish to pull any items from the consent agenda to discuss specifically? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, Mr. Hopkins, a second.
Second.
Ms. Porton, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstain. All right, the consent agenda carries as presented. Next up, Dr. Morrison, we're into our action items, and I'm going to turn it over to you for consider and accept excess collections for debt service.
Well, actually, it's either going to be a really good board meeting or a really challenging board meeting, depends on how you view it, because it will be the Chris Lynn show tonight. So I will yield the floor to Chris Lynn and let him take it from there.
It's going to be an excellent night. So yeah, item 7A, in your packet, you have information from Montgomery County Tax Assessor's Office. This is an annual requirement that this motion be adopted. They have provided to you a report that says the tax collection rate for the year was and will be 100% in regards to debt service collections. So I would ask for your approval of that, to accept the excess collections for 2020 debt service and clarification and certification for debt service collection rate for 21-22 fiscal year as presented.
Are there any questions? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to accept excess collections for debt service certification and debt service collection rate for 21-22 fiscal year?
So moved.
All right, Mr. Kirby, second.
Second.
Mr. Hopkins, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, that motion carries. It looks like, Chris, you're also up with item 7B.
Yes, sir, and
Go ahead.
I'm gonna combine kind of 7B and 7C in the presentation tonight,
Okay.
and then allow y'all to come back and make the motions that you need to make. And so, as the last speaker referenced tonight, we are here to adopt the district's tax rate. I just wanted to start with some very basics. All the Montgomery ISD Board of Trustees does is adopt the tax rate. The tax rate is applied per $100 of assessed value. The Board of Trustees does not provide the property value assessments. That function is performed by the Montgomery County Appraisal District, so we do not have anything to do with your property value assessments. Tonight we're going to be asking you to adopt two rates. One is the maintenance and operations tax rate, and one is the debt service or INS tax rate. And then when you combine those two together, ultimately we get the total tax rate for the district. So when we're talking about debt service, we are talking about interest and sinking, hence INS. The proposed rate that we're asking you to adopt this evening is 0.3743. This portion of the tax rate is used to pay for the district's bond indebtedness. And so the things that we use this money for are to make our principal and interest payments on any outstanding bonds and to pay off our outstanding debt. We do not use this money for employee salary increases or any general operating expenses of the district. Here's a history of the debt service rate in Montgomery ISD going back to 2007 and 2008. You can see that it was fairly steady until 15-16. That's when the district passed a bond referendum. That's what caused the increase in that tax rate from that point forward. I wasn't in the district at that time, but looking at the documents presented during that process, I looked at the 21-22 fiscal year, and based on those financial projections that were presented at that time, this is exactly the tax rate that was proposed at that time. So we are right on course with what was promised during the 2015 bond referendum. The other portion of the tax rate that we're going to be asking you to adopt this evening is the maintenance and operations rate. And so the proposed rate we're asking for is 0.8857. This portion of the tax rate is what we use to pay for our daily operating expenses. So this is where we pay for employee salaries, our utility bills, any contracted services, building maintenance, technology, instructional materials, whatever we use on a daily basis, this is the funding source for that. We do not use this money for bond and principal payments. We do not pay off outstanding debt with this portion of the tax rate. Here is the history of the M&O tax rate for Montgomery ISD dating back to 2005-2006. You can see at that point it was $1.46 per $100 of value. And tonight the rate that we're asking you to adopt is 0.8857, so significantly lower than it was back in 2005-2006. As I mentioned earlier, when you combine the M&O rate and the debt service rate, we get our total tax rate. And so 0.8857 plus 0.3743 gives us a total rate of $1.26. And so here is our history of the total tax rate. You can see that in 05-06, the total tax rate was $1.66. What we're asking you to approve this evening is $1.26. So as you go through this process tonight, unfortunately, it's not the clearest process. What I need you to understand, a couple of things that I want to point out to you. Looking at this slide, you will see that the total tax rate from 2020-21 was $1.2798. The rate that you are adopting this evening is 1.26, so the total tax rate has gone down, okay? As we go back to the M&O rate, last year's maintenance and operations rate was 0.9423. This year's proposed rate is 0.8857. Once again, that rate is lower than last year's M&O rate. There is a slight increase in the debt service rate. Last year's was 0.3375, and this year's is 0.3743. Once again, that is caused due to the payment of our bond indebtedness. We need to increase that rate to make sure that we continue to pay our bond payments. So in summary, total tax rate going down, M&O rate going down, slight increase in the INS rate. Some of the language that you're going to have to move tonight says that it's an overall tax increase. The purpose of that language is because even with these lower rates, based on the property values, that will generate more income from taxes than it did in last year, based on last year's rates. Okay, but that has to do with property values, so it can be a little confusing. Just wanted to.
And just to be clear, Mr. Lynn, the board has no control over property values and how they're assessed. That is done by
Montgomery County Appraisal District. So that was my real quick summary of both of those items, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have some questions. They're really more observations. This is one of the things when I first joined the board that were kind of the more confusing to me, why we turn around and tell the community we're reducing the rate, and yet in a second you're going to hear something that says increase the rate. I would hope the community just understands from the graphs that Mr. Lenz showed, we have worked really hard to keep the tax rate down. That's our piece of the puzzle. And, you know, the district is being fiscally responsible with this dollar 26%. And so I just ask if anybody has any questions, please get in touch with Mr. Lynn about it, you know, because he can explain it very well that even a country boy like me can understand it. So
Thank you.
any questions from the board? All right, then I will actually read, we do have to read these specific comments here, these specific motions. So I will go ahead and see if I can't butcher them. Is there a motion that the 2021 ad valorem tax rate for debt service be adopted and set by the order or resolution at $0.3743 per every $100 of valuation?
I so move.
All right, Ms. Porton, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hopkins, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Next, for the maintenance operations, is there a motion to move that the 2021 ad valorem tax rate for maintenance and operations be adopted and set by order or resolution at $0.8857 per every $100 of valuation? Mr. Hammonds, is there a second?
A second.
Ms. Turner, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? That motion also carries. And finally, we have to do one overall. Is there a motion that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of $1.26 per every $100 of valuation, which is effectively a 0.01% increase in the tax rate?
So moved.
Mr. Kirby, and a second?
Second.
Mr. Hammonds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Mr. Lynn, that motion carries. And are there any other comments or questions on those elements? We good?
Sir?
All right. Moving on for our next item for consideration, item 7D on our agenda. Consider approval of professional architectural services for a possible bond initiative. Mr. Lynn.
I promise this is more exciting than tax rates, okay? And it's a little more clear as well. So let me walk you through a process here. So I'm going to go back. You know, we like to go on this journey. So this is a process. We started with a demographic study to find out information. And so this board authorized us to hire population and survey analysts to go out and perform a demographic study. We presented their findings to this Board of Trustees in April and then again in May. And so I pulled out a couple of interesting things from that study. They quoted at that time that recent subdivision platting has dramatically increased in the last 12 months. In that report, they showed that 3,331 projected new single-family housing units were planned or were estimated between January of 21 and October of 2025. They provided the district with conservative estimates about future student enrollment, and they labeled those as low, moderate, and high. Under their low model, they projected that in October of 2021, the district enrollment would be 9,156. And by October of 2025, that number would be 10,226 students. Under the moderate growth model, they laid out in October of 2021 an enrollment of 9,235 students. By October of 2025, that number would grow to 10,406 students. Under the high growth model, a range of 9,289 in October of 21 to 10,620. And so just to update you, as we stand here this evening, our current enrollment number is 9,233 students in MISD. So just to prove that this demographic study was based on what is taking place in the community and to caution us that we need to plan ahead for this increase in students that are coming our way.
And Mr. Lund, the August 17th number, does that include students who are still registering?
No, sir.
And does that include students who have not yet shown up to campus but are still enrolled?
No, sir. That's 9,233 students who have stepped foot on MISD campuses to this point. So that was one piece of the journey. The second piece, we needed to find out data about our current and existing facilities. And so this board authorized administration to conduct a facilities assessment with Huckabee Architects, and we presented their findings to you in June of 2021. Under that facility assessment, there was a team of architects, engineers who walked each facility in Montgomery ISD. They were looking at a multitude of things: ADA compliance, what condition are our roofs in, flooring, ceilings, interior finishes, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, technology, our cafeterias, our kitchen equipment. They looked at a multitude of things. Based on that report that was presented to you then, they had an estimated facility assessment need of $63.69 million. And as we discussed at that time, remember our general operating budget is about $80 million per year. And so it's almost impossible to try and meet that type of facility assessment need through our regular general operating budget. The third piece of that journey was the creation of our strategic plan. And as the gentleman said a little earlier, that process included development of 5 goals. And so I pulled out a few of the key focuses from the strategic plan. The first one dealt with career and technical education, and the exact wording in the plan said to provide educational facilities that support a full range of CTE courses addressing college, career, and military readiness expectations. CTE was peppered throughout Goal 1 of that strategic plan, so it's obviously a focus of this district moving forward. Goal 2 dealt with school safety, and so there were a couple of issues pointed out in school safety that apply to facilities and as we look forward to the future. One of those, install and maintain surveillance equipment designed to increase safety and security, and then also at our secondary campuses to try and help deal with the vaping issue that's taking place on campus. Goal 3 dealt with facilities and operations, and so throughout that portion of the strategic plan, we heard terms like implement a proactive plan of facility modernization. Develop district vehicle replacement schedules, primarily talking about our bus fleet, making sure that those vehicles are being replaced at the proper replacement schedule, which we are severely behind on. Technology had a place in all 5 goals throughout the strategic plan. So the portion that I pulled out was, making sure that the district will increase and sustain the ratio of classroom technology devices available to students. So here we've started with the growth of students, our facilities assessment, and then our goals from our strategic plan as we move forward in this district.
Mr. Lund, just very quickly, on all 3 of these, the demographic study, the facilities assessment, the strategic plan, they were all done with board initiative.
Yes, sir.
And
Absolutely.
all 3 were presented to the board for their consideration and commentary.
Yes, sir.
All 3 have been shared publicly in many, many venues with the community.
Yes, sir.
And all of these plans are available on our website.
Yes, sir.
And where can anybody find those under?
I might have to defer to Justin for that, but we have a transparency section on our website where most of those documents should be housed. Okay. So that leads us to why we're here tonight. In June, my department issued a request for qualifications, otherwise known as an RFQ, for architectural services. So we put out a document that said, hey, if you're interested in providing architectural services to Montgomery ISD, please submit your qualifications and here's what you need to submit. We received 13 submittals from interested firms. After receiving those submittals, we did our initial scoring and review, and we identified the top 5 firms based on their qualifications. And that's the key as we move forward through this process, is each of these firms was selected based on their qualifications that they submitted. The top 5 firms were interviewed by an architect selection committee, and those interviews occurred on Friday, August the 6th, and there was 11 members of that committee, and that included members of district administration, campus administration, parents, community representatives, and local business partners. We asked that committee that day for 2 things. 1, to identify the firm who was most qualified to provide pre-bond related services for Montgomery ISD. And 2, to select the top 3 firms the district should consider for any future construction-related projects moving forward in MISD. And so this path has kind of led us to this point where we know we have needs. We've got additional students who are coming. The demographic study tells us that. We're already seeing evidence of that on our campuses as we stand here today. The facility assessment has told us that we have existing facilities that have needs that need to be met. And we have identified goals from our strategic plan of how we want to carry this district forward. And so in order, we're asking you this evening to consider approval of a firm for architectural services and pre-bond related services so that this district can continue down the path of gathering information for a possible bond initiative. What you are not doing tonight is you are not saying that there's going to be a bond referendum. What we are asking you to do is to authorize administration to continue down this journey and to report back to you and to this community our findings so that this Board of Trustees can ultimately determine whether or not a bond referendum is actually called for. Okay, so with that, the Architect Selection Committee is recommending, and I support this recommendation, for pre-bond related services. We are asking this board to select Huckabee Architects as the firm to provide any necessary pre-bond related services for MISD and authorize administration to negotiate and finalize contract documents for those services. This would ultimately launch activities associated with a bond initiative. But once again, that would not, this vote tonight does not mean that there will be a bond referendum. The second thing that we're asking this evening is for this board to select Huckabee, PBK, and Stantec as the firms to provide architectural services for MISD projects and authorize administration to assign projects to these firms based as needed. So that's what we're asking you for your consideration this evening. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, Mr. Kirby. So we have Huckabee as the pre-bonds to help us get information on that. And then if we go down that path, then we would have already approved. There will not be any more interviewing. These 3 would be who we would use during the bond process.
Should there be a bond referendum, right, and should it be successful, then we would look at these 3 firms, and probably administratively, we would conduct some additional interviewing to determine which firm was best suited for a particular project and move forward with assigning those projects.
But not a whole other process of
no,
RFQ.
sir, it would be one of these 3 firms. We're basically creating a pool of architects for us to go to and use as we deem necessary.
I know we've used Huckabee before. Have we used PBK and Stantec?
I apologize. I have a limited time in this district.
Okay.
I do not know in the history of Montgomery ISD if PBK has done work here before. I do not believe Stantec has done work here before.
They have in some of our neighboring districts.
Other questions?
Kind of have more of a statement, I guess. I mean, we've spoken, I am rather adverse to bonds as it is, but I think in light of all the information we have, it's prudent to take this step. Although I'm still a hard sell on it.
No, and we understand, you know, it is obviously a financial commitment if a bond referendum is called, you know, that this board would be asking the community to support. We're not there either, okay? What we're asking for tonight, just so that everyone is clear, and if you're not in this room and you're watching this video, to re-emphasize, the action tonight is not saying that there will be a bond referendum. We are asking for authorization to continue towards that path. And the information will tell us ultimately what the decision is.
Other questions? I have a few.
Okay.
So let's say we work with a company tonight. We say, go ahead. And then in a few months, we decide, this isn't the time, or this is the time. What's the cost to us for these few months? We usually get a little statement there mentioning the cost.
Right.
And is that paid later, or how does that work?
So Texas law, when you're procuring professional services, is a little different. And so we have some contract terms that we still have to negotiate. Most firms, given that point, if they put in some work and we say, this just isn't the right time, we're going to delay it and we're going to come back at the next opportunity, would probably be willing to work with us with those costs. Most of that work would already be done at that point for the next time. There would be some updating, of course, but we'll have to have those conversations as part of our contract negotiations.
Chris, can I just clarify, because someone watching this may ask a question, we're not presenting a cost to these firms tonight to the board.
We are not.
Is that because we're choosing not to, or statutorily we're not able to?
Statutorily, we are supposed to select these firms based on their qualifications.
So the
and
decision
then
not to ask for pricing and present it to you tonight is not our decision, but it is directed by?
State purchasing laws.
And therefore, that's why the cost is blank on our.
Yes, just kind of reference it like on the tax rates. You know, there's what we're allowed to do and not do, and we try very hard to follow the law.
And so I was, in the motion that you have in front of you, should you choose to act on this tonight, part of that language says authorize administration to negotiate and finalize contract documents. So if we get into negotiations and we're unable to come to an agreement with Huckabee Architects as a part of those contract negotiations, then obviously we will be coming back to this Board of Trustees and making a different recommendation.
Okay, I have no other questions. Other questions?
President Fuller, just one other comment about going forward. To me, this just continues what we've committed to since we first started working in our current roles within Montgomery ISD, which is to be transparent and thoughtful planners. Whether it was the demographic study, whether it was facilities assessment, the entire creation of strategic plan was not to come in and say this is what we think is going to happen, but to try to get as much information as we can. Sometimes it's information provided to us from the state of Texas or from local authorities. Sometimes it's information that goes beyond the scope of our ability to do well, and so we go out and we seek people to do demographic studies, facilities assessments, some of the reviews that we brought forward. What we try to do is to present it to this board, this community, and then we try to bring forward strong recommendations based on data, not only the data that's observational by us, but data that's validated by third parties. Even if we don't end up going forward with a bond, doing this work is critical because we're started school. People are asking, well, why aren't we having more buses, or why aren't we having the correct technology infrastructure? When are we going to address overcrowding in this facility? The mere of doing this work and gathering this data helps us bring better decisions to this board and this community. So again, we will emphasize it many times, and people are like, okay, we got it the first time. a vote to move forward with Huckabee as doing the pre-bond related services is not a vote for the bond, but it starts to put together the data that ultimately, if our recommendation is to come forward for this board to consider a bond, it's the work that has to be done to make sure we're doing our due diligence as a team of 8.
We actually kind of took the words out of my mouth for my statement, Dr. Morrison.
I apologize.
I would just say, I hear a lot of those same comments about overcrowding, about buses, about, the speed of which we're doing things in like car rider lines and classroom teacher sizes and things like that. And I feel like we have been very thoughtful with our evidence. And many of y'all saw me this week carrying around a big binder. We all got that big binder back in July. And so we've been coming back to it. So no matter where this vote comes out, I want to commend y'all for being evidence-based in this decision. I feel like we've got the evidence we need to make decisions on this topic. So, are there any other questions, comments? Anybody else want to make a statement? All right. Well, hearing none, then I will ask: is there a motion to select Huckabee, PBK, and Stantec as the firms to provide architectural services for future MISD projects, and authorize administration to assign projects to these firms based as necessary?
I'll make that motion.
All right, Ms. Turner, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Kirby, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. All right, that motion carries. And is there a motion to authorize administration to launch activities associated with the bond initiative and to select Huckabee as the firm to provide a necessary pre-bond related services for MISD, and authorize administration to negotiate and finalize contract documents for those services?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hopkins, and a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Porton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstain. That motion also carries. Thank you, Mr. Lynn.
Thank you.
And Dr. Morrison. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our action items for the evening. We do have a number of information items. This is where the board hears from various administrators and folks to learn a little bit about our school districts. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Morrison for 21-22 employee handbooks.
Thank you, President Fuller. I'm going to ask our Executive Director of Human Resources, Denise Miner, to come forward. Every year, we update our student handbooks and our employee handbooks at our recent workshop. And yes, Mr. Hammonds, I said workshop, not retreat. We updated you on changes to the student, and he missed it too. We updated you on changes to the student handbook. Tonight, we want to address any questions that you may have around the information that was sent prior around changes to the faculty handbook. These are not many hours of going out to meet with our staff and campus's employees to see changes that they would like to see in the handbook. This is really a state statutes legislation that was passed in the recent legislative process that the Texas Association of School Boards has gone through to make sure we have model practices on behalf of our faculty. So all of the changes were highlighted for you in red. I think Ms. Miner is here simply to answer any questions that you may have or to highlight some of the areas of particular focus.
Okay, this too is my first time speaking with each of you here at MISD. So Dr. Fuller and members of the board, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here just to bring before you the MISD Employee Handbook for 2021-2022. And each year, Montgomery ISD updates the Employee Handbook using the Model Employee Handbook provided by TASB. And as you know, at our last meeting, each of you adopted the updates to DEC Local. And in that process, the adoption had me removing all of the local considerations for leaves and absences and placing those in the employee handbook. So as you go through that, you're going to see large amounts of red, which are pieces of the leave and absence policy that we were actually asked to remove and place in the employee handbook. So that's what you're going to see in red, the large majority of. piece of the handbook that was added this year was the leave for peace officers. You're going to see a large section on that we also spoke of at our last meeting. And other than those two large pieces, you're going to see updates on employee positions and staff and so on and so forth. And the remainder of the employee handbook is just the model employee handbook we received from TASB. Any questions you may have for me? Okay, thank you very much.
Great job first time. Thank you.
Next, we are going to, because you didn't get enough of them, we're going to bring Chris Lynn one more time, which is twice on that stage as well. Mr. Lynn.
So this evening, we're presenting for your information. We're required under Texas Education Code Section 44.0331 to present to you our management fees under certain cooperative purchasing contracts. And so in your board packet, we have provided to you that we are a member of the state of Texas cooperative membership, and for that we pay a fee of $100. We are also a member of the Buy Board Purchasing Cooperative, and to be a member, we paid $800 for that one because of a couple of bus fees when we purchased new vehicles. So just wanted to make sure that we followed the Texas Education Code, and so in 2020, 2021, total management fees and membership fees were $900. Be happy to answer any questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Update on a legislative session.
Thank you, President Fuller. I am really excited to have our Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Mark Weatherly, come forward. If Mark thought he was going to join and be able to get a sense of where we are with our curriculum instruction endeavors and to create a department, which we now have a department, which we did not have before. There's nothing like having to jump proverbially into the fire, because just as we were hiring Mark, and Mark was putting together a stellar group of leaders for our curriculum instruction department, the legislature was very busy with a little piece of legislation called House Bill 4545. And you may have already had people asking about it. You will continue to have people ask about it, because as it was passed and it is being implemented, on Thursdays, more often than not, all district superintendents and leadership teams are on calls with the Commissioner of Education, still getting information about this legislation, what it means, what it doesn't mean, how it's going to get funded, how it's not going to get funded, how it's to be executed. Is it something that has to happen this year, next year? I was actually emailing back and forth on a parent who was pretty upset about it. At first was upset at us. Now she's very much an advocate of how we've tried, and you know who I'm talking about, Dr. Mark, because like all pieces of legislation, there's what's passed in Austin, there's what has to be implemented locally. We've taken this very seriously. We've provided tremendous training to our administrators and our teachers, but we felt the need to bring forward to the board so that we could start to educate our community about this piece of legislation and what it means now and moving forward. Dr. Weatherly.
All right, well, thank you very much. Dr. Fuller, Dr. Morrison, School Board Trustees, we appreciate the time before you. Standing here with me this evening are our two new instructional coordinators that we have. Elementary is Miss Jamie McAllister, and in secondary is Miss Meg Evans, as they are affectionately known as the Meg and Mac Attack. And let me tell you, they have taken no prisoners when it has come to tackling House Bill 4545 and all the other things that we have had to take over this summer. What we want to do is kind of give you an update of House Bill 4545, and we just want to look at the key changes, the accelerated learning committees that the state says that we have to do, the instruction requirements, the T-class part of it. We're going to explain all that, because in Texas, you know, we don't do anything without acronyms. And so the test at the end is going to be all the acronyms and can you pass them. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what is our department of our coordinators, our specialists, our coaches, what are we doing in conjunction with our assistant superintendents to support our principals and our teachers on the campuses so that we can help all of our students be successful, all right? So quickly looking at this past year, the 87th legislature, they set 2 new requirements that pertains to grade level promotion and learning acceleration. And of course, you know that a lot of this is due to the pandemic and some of the learning loss that the state says that our students might have had. So in the area of retention, a student in grades 5 and 8 are no longer required to be retained at the same grade level based on the STAR test. Also, grade placement committees have been eliminated, all right? So in the area of retesting, now only 1 reading and math assessment opportunity. Previously, they were 2 retaking opportunities for students. So in essence, a student who was not successful the first time, they, in layman's terms, had an 2 more opportunities to pass that test in order to be promoted to the next grade. That is really good, we feel like. That's a good part of it that we like because we don't feel like we're always testing our kids. And so the other part of that, the retesting part, is the optional STAR end of course assessments for Algebra 2 and English 3 will no longer be offered.
Dr. Weatherly, can you just because
back up?
For community, no, just for community edification, STAR is what?
The STAR?
Yes.
The state assessment test that our students, that our students are tested on at the end of the year, starting in the 3rd grade level, all right? So this summer, our House Bill 4545 started effective June the 16th, all right? So that threw a lot of districts into, I don't want to say panic mode, but certainly one of rush to make sure that we were starting to help our campuses get ready for the beginning of the school year with all these requirements that they're asking us to do. So the LEA, our local education agency, which is Montgomery ISD, we evaluated our 2021 spring STAR scores to identify students requiring accelerated instruction for this upcoming school year. Those were the students who were not successful in the spring on the STAR test. So you got to remember, we started out in a remote setting, and then we had students who remained in remote, although most of our students came back. But we also were in an asynchronous setting for most of last year. So those are some things that we want to keep in mind. So for this school year, as it's required by House Bill 4545, it's beginning. We're already in it. We're already doing it. Accelerated learning committees have to be established at the beginning of this school year. And so we have asked our districts, our campuses rather, to identify members for those committees and to start working on plans and identifying members and working on plans for those students who were not successful, all right? And so I am going to turn it over to talk about accelerated learning committees to Ms. Meg.
So it's a night of first speakers. So the accelerated learning committees are only for students who did not show proficiency in grades 3, 5, or 8. So that is our current 4th, 6th, and 9th graders on their STAR test in just the subjects of reading and math. So that is just for the ALCs. We'll still get the students who did not pass for science and social studies will receive accelerated instruction. They just will not have an accelerated learning committee. So these committees will meet at the beginning of this year, so some have already started, and they are going to make a plan for those students who did not pass grades 3, 5, 8 reading or math. The people in those committees are going to be the receiving teacher of the subject that they did not pass. It will be a principal or their designee, and it will be the parent of that student. If that student is identified as special ed, that will all happen in their ARD committee, so another acronym for you. All right, and the plan has to be documented in that meeting. They're going to write down the plan, and the parent will walk away with that plan as well. So again, the people that are required to be in that meeting, it has to be the principal or the designee. It has to be the parent of the student who did not show proficiency, and it has to be the teacher of the subject or grade level that they did not perform satisfactorily on. And it could be, for this year, only the receiving teacher, since this was implemented in the summer. If a student then again fails this coming spring, then they will again meet for an accelerated learning committee, but an additional member will be either the superintendent or the superintendent's designee. And then, like I said previously, if that student is identified as special ed, this learning committee will be a part of their ARD.
Good evening. It is such an honor to speak before you tonight. I have the opportunity to share with you the accelerated learning requirements. So TEA has said that accelerated learning is a requirement for all students that were not successful on STAR. That has confused many community members and parents in that there are 4 levels in which students can score on STAR. There's the master's level, the meets, the approaches, as well as the does not meet. So when we talk about proficiency, we're talking about the does not meet category. So there are certain things in which we need to make sure we have in place for our students. So one option that the state gave us was that we would assign a teacher who is certified as a master exemplary or recognized teacher. And that is not something that we had in place through Montgomery ISD. So what we are going with is option 2. That is the option that we are selecting. So students are going to receive 30 hours of supplemental instruction. What that means is it is in addition to what their regular instruction is. So we could call that tutoring, which is a familiar term.
Amy, can we go back for option
Yes, sir.
1?
Yes.
How many districts have option 1 truly as a viable opportunity?
Very few
Can
in
you
the state of
explain why?
Texas. It has to do with funding in which they had to apply for in, I believe, in this last school year. So it would be, help me explain this a little bit better. Yeah, the teacher incentive allotment. So in order to go through that process, districts applied for that. There was a very extraneous selection process for it, and then through that, teachers were designated master, exemplary, or recognized. Another option within that is if they're state board certified or nationally board certified, which we do not have any nationally board certified teachers in our school districts.
So that all came out of House Bill 3, which was, as you know, passed in the prior legislative session. The teacher incentive allotment was created, and even the school districts that started earlier are just now getting teachers identified in these categories. So you have a very few number of teachers across the state of Texas that can meet option 1. So then the only other option is, as Jamie said, to have teachers go through the national board certification process. I know a little bit about this because I'm a very proud 3-time survivor of a wife who's gone through the national board certification process. It is arduous and it is time intensive. It takes about 18 months from start to finish, and that's if you're successful the first time. Many teachers, because of the requirements of that process, need to go through it at least twice before they get their national board certification. I only share this because most people would say, well, of course I want my teacher, my student in a master teacher's class. This is not us being able to say, hey, Gary's a great teacher, we're going to give you Gary. Gary may be a great teacher, but if he's not identified as a master teacher through the teacher incentive allotment, or he's not nationally board certified, we can't use option 1. Hence, part of the frustration is to be given an option that is very little available for most school districts. Obviously, we need to build towards that, as most school districts in Texas have to.
Relative to option 2, how is the 30 hours allotted over the time frame?
Within the school year, including the subsequent summer.
Okay.
So as with the requirements that are expected, all the instruction needs to be targeted in the standards. Targeted instruction means that it's specified to what would be considered priority standards, as well as what those specific students need in order to be successful. The 30 hours can happen within this school year, and it can also happen in the subsequent summer. It has to happen at least once per week. We have realized that if we were to take 30 hours, divide it within the year, that needs to be approximately an hour per week minimum for that to happen and be successful before testing. And of course, the overall goal is for the student to meet proficiency at the end of the school year. So we are working for them and setting goals for them to have a satisfactory performance. At least that approaches level on STAR in the spring. The state has also put forth that the group needs to be no more than 3 students for every teacher or person that is providing the accelerated instruction. Of course, parents can consent for the group to be larger, and so we have that opportunity. We've had some written letters in place so that when we do talk to parents about the accelerated instruction, that we can explain that we can provide this accelerated instruction in groups larger than 3. And also, we need to be sure that the accelerated instruction is provided by a person that is trained using the materials that are provided. And
Amy, can we go back?
yes, sir.
Question for you. If a student did not take the STAR assessment in the spring, they're okay, right? We can just look at their grades and say they probably would have passed, so it's all.
Actually, because they haven't demonstrated proficiency, that they would need accelerated instruction. If a student was enrolled in a public school or an open charter school at the end of 2021, they're expected to have accelerated instruction as well. One option the state is giving us is the beginning of the year assessment, which is made up of a variety of released STAR questions. We can administer that to the students, and if they meet proficiency on that assessment, then they do not have to proceed with accelerated instruction. However, a parent can determine that even if they did meet proficiency on that assessment, they still can receive that accelerated instruction. Who is excluded from this are those students that are moving in from out of state or were not enrolled in a public school in the spring.
So the scenario of if a student, let's say, had COVID back in the spring and missed the STAR test, they're an excellent student.
GT, taking honors level classes, well on their way to AP scholars, yes.
So then they would take what's it called, that you said they could take soon?
It's called the TEA optional BOY assessment.
Okay, so they would be given that.
Yes.
And then they would not have to do.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
But if they don't, then we have to put them through 30 hours of remediation.
Yes.
And so where you're probably going to get some concern from some of our parents, rightfully so, as they're looking at their child saying, I don't need my child to have this remediation. And we have to come back to them and say, yes, but the law says. And therefore, that's where we're starting to have some of the push-pull. Because to your point, Ms. Turner, many of our students who would have done quite well on STAR assessment didn't take it last year because of COVID, or they were being remote instructed. And so there are many reasons why. The other challenge is obviously when Dr. Weatherly said many school districts were panicking, that is true, because many school districts got their spring assessment data and showed a tremendous number of students needing remediation. We're very fortunate. We've got excellent teachers, great students, and so while we have some students who need remediation, nowhere near the level that many other school districts do. But if you're a school with 80, 90% of your kids needing remediation, do the math. If you could only put 3, if you used every adult on your campus, you'd still be 40 or 50 adults shy of being able to provide 3-to-1 instruction.
A lot of it, we were able to get kids back quicker and keep them enrolled. And
we were very fortunate to be able to get 95% of our kids back by October of last year, and the vast majority of those did take the STAR assessment and did quite well.
Another question. So if a student has been identified as dyslexic, and let's say they don't do well on the reading portion of the test, but they're already getting services, do those services count to those 30 hours, or they're going to get services plus?
Right. No, ma'am. This is in addition to their dyslexia services. Yes. And might I add that this is 30 hours in each subject area with which they were not proficient. So that would mean a 4th grader would have, if they did not meet standard on math and reading, that would mean 60 hours of accelerated instruction. And then at the secondary level, you take in social studies and science and reading and math.
So how do you fit this time into their current?
Great question.
Great question. So a lot of the thinking around this is really having to be out of the box thinking, and us realizing that if we expect great results, we're going to have to do things differently perhaps. So a lot of conversation around master schedules is happening, and how to design that in the day. Some campuses have a designated time in the day that would not just be for accelerated instruction, but also for enrichment. So it would be meeting the needs of all students. Because, as I'm going to share on the next slide, this cannot take the place of any tier 1, or as we say, core instruction. This has to be in addition to. So it cannot happen during the school day unless it is time specified in which they're not missing any other content.
Jamie, just, can you go back 2 slides, I think it was, to where the implementation of this was to occur? I'll tell you where. One more. Okay. Effective June 16th, 2021. We were getting the data, disaggregating the data, finding out who did well, who needed support. At the same time as our elementary and middle school and high school principals were busy doing their master schedules, having a lot of new students enrolled, trying to get them enrolled, staff up, and then all of a sudden you're also having to stop and say, how are we going to schedule remediation for students that need it when you're about to hear the conditions that we can and can't pull students from. So now let's go back to your next slide.
Yes.
So one more question. So how many kids, what percentage of the student population is this that are affected?
In the elementary level, there are 264 students that were not successful in reading at 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. 200.
Or didn't take the test.
Excuse me?
Or did not take the test.
That is just those that did not pass. I don't have the data on those that did not. The campuses are getting that as we speak to find out how to register for that BOI assessment. So 264 reading, 293 math, and 125 5th grade science. Science is only tested in 5th grade at the elementary and secondary.
So that's a huge amount of hours. So we're talking 700-ish kids at 30 hours a kid, and we've got to pay for that?
Oh, you're pushing all the buttons, Mr. Hopkins.
Hey, I was quiet for the rest of I was real quiet for the rest of it, so anyway.
Presentation, we're about to touch on
All right.
Yes. You want to talk about secondary numbers?
Secondary had 473 tests that were not performed satisfactorily, but sometimes those are by the same student, right? So it might only be 273 students, although it was 473 tests, right?
Right. But no matter if it's the same student, that's still the number of hours times 30 per. That's a lot of hours. One thing I didn't mention on this slide is that to the greatest extent possible, the person that's providing the accelerated instruction needs to remain the same. Of course, that's what's best for our students. So we do not want different people moving in and out. There's extenuating circumstances that could prevent that, but to the greatest extent possible, it does remain the same person.
And I just want to emphasize it because I do want to brag on our teachers and our schools for a minute. Those numbers, like you kind of grasped your, but
yes.
In most school districts around us, that's the number at a school within their district. Those are our district totals.
Yeah, our numbers are amazingly low, and I mean, that's why you got to keep kids in school. We can't be shutting schools down.
Yes, so as I stated before, this is to supplement the core curriculum. So that would mean that during math, reading, writing, science, social studies, even including recess, art, music, PE, technology applications, all those times, it cannot be in place of those. It needs to supplement. So before school, after school, or during a designated time set for accelerated instruction. And that concludes that piece. Something that we did want to share is T-Class, which stands for Texas COVID Learning Acceleration Supports. So of course we had ESSER funds, and then TEA put forth an opportunity for us to apply for a grant.
So Jamie, might I correct you very quickly? So when we say ESSER funds, ESSER are the federal dollars that came from the stimulus. And that was a sizable amount of money, as you know, that was distributed across the state of Texas. It just didn't find its way to Montgomery ISD quite the same way that it did in other school districts. So you might hear about districts using their ESSER funds to hire 200 student teachers from Sam Houston. That's not our lived experience. You might hear about rehired teachers coming back to do tutorials at wonderful salaries. That's would be awesome, except again, those ESSER funds that they just did not come our way. So there are funding available through this state grant that Jamie's going to now talk about, but then we also need to be realistic about what our opportunities are going to be to get this grant.
Yes. So there are 10 decision points. So the whole purpose of this T-Class grant is kind of like I mentioned before. We have to think differently about the way we approach learning in our schools. So there were 10 decision points, 5 strategies listed on the top: strategic planning, instructional materials, teacher pipelines, more time, and innovative school models. As a senior leadership team, and Meg and I, we sat around the table and talked about each decision point in detail to determine whether or not this would be something we would want to apply for. There were 4 decision points that we did decide to move forward with. We had subcommittees for each of those decision points to determine within each, because within each decision there's an A, a B, sometimes a C, and to determine what we would want to do with each. So those 4 points are high quality core approved products. Those would be products that would be used in our core curriculum. High quality supplemental to supplement that core curriculum. You had to opt in to those core products in order to opt into the supplemental. And then teacher recruitment support, so things such as stipends for paraprofessionals seeking teacher certification. And then the last one is tutoring supports. As you hear all of these hours that needs to be done, how can we get some of the Texas vetted teacher or tutors in our building? So some funding related to that. We have submitted that application, and we look forward to this fall hearing the outcome.
And so it would be reasonable to have someone say, well, why didn't you just apply for everything? Dr. Weatherly, did you want to offer an opinion on that?
Sure, absolutely. And let me say this too before I talk about not applying for all 10 of those. One of the things that we did on all these decision points is we brought in committees of teachers, administrators, people from our campuses to get input from them. And the reason we felt like we could really do well in these 4 areas instead of all 10 of them was we felt like concentrating on these 4 areas instead of all 10, that was the best way to put our efforts and our resources into these 4, because we felt like we could do these very well. And we felt like we do a lot of good things very well to begin with. And so one of the things—
Can we go back very quick, Mark,
yes,
on these? So for example, strategic planning, you might say, hey, we should apply for that. We just did that, did a pretty good job on it. Community seems to be happy with our new strategic plan. That's not what it is. It is very specific ways to teach that our teachers would absolutely have issue with. It's for schools that have high numbers of kids who did not do well, as opposed to taking away a lot of the support and autonomy that our teachers have, and they are earning that. And so the Strong Summer Program, you might say, well, we want Strong Summer Program. Why wouldn't we want that? But again, very prescriptive ways to do things that are not in the best interest, in our opinion, of Montgomery County Public Schools. And additionally, some of these, you look at the criteria and you have to have a high number of kids not successful, and then based on other criteria where, you know, from the business perspective, is the juice worth the squeeze of trying to apply for it, when the reality is there's just segments of this we are not going to meet the funding models for. So we did try to look at the areas we thought fit within our district that could support the needs of our students and honor our teachers, not make them feel like they're the issue.
So while this is a small part of what we do, it has consumed a great deal of our time. And so if you're wondering, what have you been doing with all this? Well, in front of you are some of the things that we have been devoting our time to. We talked about it a while ago. We've been providing forms and letters for our campuses to administer or to hand out to parents. We've been giving them data. We've been doing some of the data for them so that they can concentrate their efforts on other things. We've been providing data for them to support the accelerated instruction. We've been talking a lot with them. We've been meeting with, I told you a while ago, we had meetings with campus leaders and campus staff and talking about implementing this and scaling that, and what does it look like, and brainstorming ideas and getting more, all the heads in the room so that we can figure out what's the best way to approach this for Montgomery ISD. The fourth bullet, which we think is probably one of the most important, is providing teacher training on those materials. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, and coordinating that BOY, that beginning of the year assessment. We've been coordinate those efforts for our campuses. That's that optional assessment that the students who were not here, not the ones that didn't fail, that failed, but the ones that were not here, we can provide a beginning of the year assessment for them. And then obviously, as Dr. Morrison said a while ago, there are updates that come out, if not weekly, almost daily, about what's going on in the great state of Texas. And so before I entertain any thoughts or any questions from you, let me say this, that a lot of this is focused on intervention. And in Montgomery ISD, we are very, very fortunate to have students who come to us who are prepared to learn every day. And so we feel like, first and foremost, our best intervention is providing Tier 1 or core, which is the initial instruction in our classrooms. We feel that doing that is going to be our best intervention. And so that is where we put a lot of our efforts into, because we feel like teaching is where it's at. And then we'll intervene where we have to and differentiate it for those students, which this is about, those students, as the need arises if they are not successful. All right, so do you have any questions for us this time?
What was the acronym, the MEG what?
The MEG and Mac Attack.
The MEG and Mac Attack. Well, y'all are doing good work, so thank you.
This is a wicked issue, and I commend y'all for doing that. I mean, you have, in my first gut reaction, Dr. Weatherly, you've shown me that we are trying our best to be responsive to the learning that was lost this year. I personally don't know how we're going to do, any school district can do this big of a job, but you guys have mixed in there, some of the elements of getting the beginning of the year assessment done to help reduce our numbers a little bit, hopefully. We're still being responsive. I can't thank y'all enough. So, questions?
I would guess that you've just gotten reactions to this from parents all over the place, because I'm sitting here thinking of the parent that's excited that there's this opportunity to get this because their child is struggling. But then I'm imagining what I just brought up about them missing it in the spring, or in the past parents have opted out. And so maybe a parent opted out of having their kids take STAR not knowing this was coming. So I'm sure you've had to do a lot of communication.
Well, that's what we felt like presenting this to you tonight. The more that we can talk about it and bring as much information to the table that we have, and as we get it in real time, provide that for people, because it's very important, and parents want to know that.
Oh, for sure.
And we're meeting with our PTO, PTA presidents in the next, I think, 2 weeks, Justin, and so we'll be offering to do road shows. We're, as we did last year, numerous town halls. We're trying to communicate this every way. Part of the challenge, as Dr. Weatherly just said, it changes constantly. So you start to communicate that, and then you find out, no, we're actually not going to make you do this year. That's for next year. And, I just remember a conversation I had, and I don't want to sound like I'm down on House Bill 4545. I truly appreciate the spirit of trying to make sure that kids who suffered lost learning during COVID, that the state of Texas is trying to address that. Truly appreciate that. I do remember a conversation I had with Speaker of the House in North Carolina, Tom Tillis, who's now a United States Senator. And he said, he said legislators all think we're smarter the day after the election than the day before. The what of this is phenomenal. The how becomes very problematic. And so we're trying to figure out how to institute and implement these things that are now in legislation. And I think the frustrating part, Ms. Turner, is when you start asking those questions, a lot of parents are going to be very appreciative of this and appreciative that there are additional accelerated learning opportunities for their child. There are going to be others who, because of their IEP or their own course of studies, do not want that. And how we reconcile those things is going to be very, very challenging. But at the end of the day, this is the law. And so we will do the very best we can with what we have. We're doing a very good job under the leadership of Dr. Weatherly and his outstanding team and our campus principals. Our principals are eyed wide open. I think after Ms. Minor did the HR processes, procedures this summer during their workshop. Then we did House Bill 45, and they still came back the next day, so that was a good thing. So their level of concern is high, but because they want to do a good job with it, they will do a good job with it. But we will come back to this board and provide updates on how we're implementing this, because it's very, very important.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, next up, last information item is a first reading revision of board policy, BE local for the board meeting agendas.
Does Chris want one more shot?
Yeah, this is a
Oh,
first.
this is the policy. He's got one more Chris thing. This is actually in our workshop, if you remember. The board had a conversation with our TASB consultant and wanted to model other best practice of school districts across the state of Texas to require 2 board members to put something on a board agenda. And so the policy is for, in fact, the first reading of that to be considered, and then it will come back to this board in September for a vote.
I want to make just one little observation. The elements that have been amended are in blue, and I do like the addition, the board president not having the authority to remove something without these board members' specific authorization. So as you recall, back in December, I made the same commitment to y'all. If you've got an issue that we want to talk about, let's get it on an agenda. We're simply focusing on trying to get 2 people first. So there will be this is our first reading. There'll be a future vote, either through consent agenda or specific vote. We'll go from there. Are there any questions? Now we're up for Mr. Lynn with the monthly financials, who has none. Board members, were there any questions on the monthly financials? All right, hearing none, the board does not need to go into closed session. And for that reason, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned at 7:35 p.m.